Hey, howdy, how y'all doing? I'm doing art videos now. If you don't know me, you probably know the brain damage I've inflicted onto the internet. And I'm here to do you a favor, to teach you about art, or at least give you some advice. My intention with these art videos is to educate, entertain, just have fun with it. I don't consider myself the greatest artist ever, but I also feel like trade secrets should be told and artists should help other artists with getting better. I'd rather give advice and help give others the ability to draw and improve. That's the focus. Giving folks a drive and desire to draw, advice to get there, and so on and so forth. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's boogity into it with visual flow.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
This video in particular, we're going to talk about composition and visual flow. We're just going to go over the basics, and if folks enjoy this, I'll work on breaking these down more in individual episodes and such, but for now, just the basics. Now, if you look at this thumbnail that I made for this video, you're probably already starting right over here in this green area, and your eyes are moving towards the text. Your eyes may end up doing something else like this, or maybe you might even do this. Point being, though, is that your eyes are focusing in on one singular point and then spreading off and going in one direction. This is a basic form of visual flow, and I'm going to start breaking it down bit by bit. First off, let's go ahead and remove the color so that we can see a couple things. Now, onto the left of this, there's already a lot of stuff going on. Meanwhile, over here, there's a lot of nothing. This is something that's referred to as positive and negative space. We'll go more into it here in just a moment. But point being is there's a lot of stuff that's just occupying the canvas, and then there's one half that's literally not doing anything. There's nothing in there. It's just a void. Positive and negative space are very important when it comes to creating a sense of visual flow and direction. Because as you can tell, the only thing going on over here on this right side is the text. It's basically just like a gutter space type of deal. Meanwhile, over here on the left, there's tons of line work going on. So your brain just kind of goes over to either one way or the other and then follows in a simple flow. Right now, with there being no color, it's basically just like a monochrome type of thing. Your brain's either going to go over here starting at the text, or it starts right over here on the left-hand side, and will go one way or the other. That's just a basic sense of visual flow. Basically, your eye is attracted to what's grabbing your attention the most. Whatever it is, like the brightest thing on the page, the most detailed, etc. And the importance here is that the visual flow helps with creating a solid composition of any piece that you're trying to make. Because with your art, you want there to be a clear sense of direction of what you're looking at, especially as you get into more nitty-gritty type of pieces. Putting back on the full colors here, you could tell where exactly you need to start from. Everything already here is already much more colorful and attractive, and then your eyes start to move all the way over here to see the text. You see this piece, and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then you realize, wait a second, text, what is this talking about right here? In order to create a decent composition, you need to understand the principles of art. Yes, there are principles of art in order to help make a great compositional piece. And we're going to go over them real quick.
On and off the court, straight fundamentals.
These are balance, movement, rhythm, pattern, contrast, unity, and emphasis. Balance is the distribution of weight of a piece. Movement is the visual flow. I know I just said that, but movement is very important in how you're interpreting the piece and what it's wanting you to follow along with. Rhythm is the organization of different pieces. As you can see right here, what you could consider rhythm is the way that these little spikes over here kind of form as like little arrows, and they go in one specific direction. Meanwhile, you have the main character here that's going straight up. But they all have their specific rhythm to this piece. Pattern is the recognition of pieces. Basically, every single illustration is, as the name implies, an illusion. It's an illusion. It was a trick. You're basically fooling people. You're doing a gadzook. You're doing a hoodwink, baby. You're doing a bamboozling of the eyes because you're essentially turning just a bunch of lines into something you understand. Pattern recognition, baby. Pattern recognition, baby. Contrast essentially is you're just juxtaposing different pieces together that have a different conflicting nature in order to continue that cohesion. Meanwhile, unity is basically all the parts of the pieces coming together to be a cohesive unit. And emphasis is the focus of the piece. Boy, it's that part where I get to talk about memes. You're going to hear me talk about memes a lot. This is my favorite subject. Memetics and pattern recognition. First of all, let's talk about that real quick. Memetics. That's just a fancy term for memes. You know what a meme is, but let's break down the word real quick. Meme is a term that is formed from the words gene and memema, basically meaning mimic and mimicry. This term was coined by Richard Dawkins. Basically, the idea was a piece of datum, which is basically a singular unit of data, that is passed down from person to person. It's essentially, it can be something like learned behavior, words, phrases, any part of culture. It's literally any piece of information that's just passed on. And for us, this relates into pattern recognition, because that's part of the reason why a lot of like online memes and jokes are so prevalent, is because they rely on pattern recognition. It's one of the reasons why we're able just to see like a couple of dots and like a vague line and just see like a face, because that's pattern recognition at it again. Our brain can see the most simplest of shapes and break it down and recognize it as something. It's absolutely incredible that our brains are able to do this. And it's also important to understand when it comes to illustrating art, because you're essentially breaking down reality into your own terms and translating that reality. Art is not necessarily trying to replicate reality, but translating it, adapting it, essentially. It's one of the reasons as well why high-fidelity realism just gets outdated so fast. It's impossible for us to one-to-one absolutely recreate reality down to everything, because we're always going to be missing something. We're missing things. Our brain is not capturing everything going on at all times. That makes reality. Our brain is essentially translating different things and just breaking things down to the simplest of shapes. Even though right now you see everything in high detail, you may not be quote-unquote seeing everything and how it works. It's a little bit of a weird thing. It's why the uncanny valley exists, is because we know that there's a certain way for things to be, but when that reality is not created properly, it's a little bit odd. It's why stylization honestly has better preservation in terms of art than trying to focus so much on heavy realism. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely places for like capturing like high fidelity realism, but as I said, it is always going to be something that is a hard goal to achieve. This is why this is important, because when you're doing illustrative work, you're basically trying to recreate something that our brains are able to recognize and recognize the patterns, so that way we could be like, oh yeah, I recognize that. I talked about this earlier, mentioning like negative and positive space, but negative and positive space is very needed when you're trying to use contrast in your art. Right here, we already have like two very contrasting colors, white and black, total light and total darkness. This is probably one of the easiest forms of like contrast. And essentially, you're using this as a baseline to create patterns and anything that's a recognizable shape. And it's also used for visual flow. If you break down this line art into silhouettes, you'll see a bit more of what I mean. As you can see right here, our eyes are naturally drawn to this silhouette right here. There's less of it, but it's much more bright against the shadowy black negative space. And our eyes can either be starting directly at it, or we start over at this corner piece and move our eyes all the way over to it. Already, you can probably see how contrast is being used here. Here we can also see the contrast as well. Even though this isn't white, it's still a lighter color than this black. And there's also a bunch of different pieces of line work going on over here that's completely different to just this big old block of black over here. With just the text as well, our eyes are automatically going over to that bright white text with the red border. It's the main source of color within this. And putting it all together, your eyes are naturally going over to all of this heavily detailed work going over here, and then more over here. Even though this is a more bright white type of thing, your eyes are attracted to all this detail, trying to figure out what's going on over here, and then it starts moving over to the text. Even though the text is a lot more of a brighter color, it kind of fades into the black background because of how simple it is compared to all the line work that's going on. To describe what kind of visual flow is going on here, allow me to present to you a triangle. Essentially, your eyes are starting right over here at the most consuming point of red and following it all the way down to this end. And the black spaces here work like a gutter, helping direct the visual traffic. Very simple form of visual flow, by the way. It's very common to do this, and it's very easy to do. You know, like when you're reading text, depending on where you're from, you're either reading it left to right to left, up and down, etc. Your brain automatically has this ability to read things from a certain direction, and so it's very common to just follow that naturally. For us over here in the West, we start from the left and go all the way to the right. However, if you're from a different part of the world, your brain's probably thinking, okay, we're going to start from the right and go all the way to the left. Even when we add color, it's still pretty obvious where the directional flow is coming from. It's coming from the most crowded spot of all of this visual activity and then moving over to the simpler stuff. Again, this triangle is consistent.
Such perfect symmetry. You are amazing. Hey, no. me sick! Get away!
Now, as I said before ad nauseum, this is the most interesting part of the piece. Why? Because of all the line work going on here. All of the bright, vibrant colors that pop up against the black background. And so our eyes would start right over here at this green area, since it's kind of got a little bit of a mix of a more open area and this black streak going down. And so our eyes move with the piece. We go all the way over. But in a more complex way, essentially, we start here. We follow the line, we follow the fingers, go to the face, go to another finger, and then we start reading the text. That's how the visual flow goes. But again, we have different arrows of direction that are going on here. The way that things are distributed that lead to how the piece is read. As you can see here, there's black streaks and arrows that are already over in the background here that point towards where we're supposed to be going. Then we also have here in the foreground the character, the way that the arrows point also creates a line of focus as well. The face also is very important because, we're naturally drawn to faces because, we recognize faces. So essentially, we're naturally led to go down this way. We see the fingers, the face, and then we see the text and start reading that. All these pieces here are distributed in such a way to naturally draw your eye. Another good example is how manga is paneled and laid out. The gutter space used on there is incredible. It's an art form to itself. But that's also a little bit too much of a complex subject to talk about today, so we're not talking about that right now, unfortunately. I do apologize, but we will get to it at some point if y'all are interested. Now that we've broken down just some of the examples real quick about what makes good visual flow, let's talk about some examples of my own work.
I saw a woman psychiatrist, and she said I was OCD, one cool dude, and she understands the way I think right now.
Now then, when you look at this Galagar piece, where does your eye immediately draw to? Well, more than likely, the end point is going to be here at the lens. But if I were to wager a guess, your eyes are probably starting right here over at the brightest point, and then moving down towards here, and then spreading out as you start seeing the other faces. This is important, because this is another type of visual flow, essentially where things fan out. To help understand it just a little bit more, let's go ahead and remove the color of the piece real quick. And even remove the lens flare. Even without the color, your brain's probably going over here as the starting point, because compared to everything else, this has the minimal amount of heavy shading going on over here. Basically just more of the ink that's being used. There's less inking going on over here, and it's a lot more light in comparison. Then your brain starts going into this part, which has more heavy black and such, going into this lighter area, and then right over to the fist is the next point, and then you see all these different faces. Now then, your brain may interpret this as going like this, or maybe it's just naturally just going like recognizing all three faces. Point being though, this thing is starting to fan out. In terms of a shape, your brain's starting here in this big circle and following this tunnel as it fans out. That's the visual flow going on here in this piece. No matter what we do with the colors, whether they're in the base colors like this, or the green filter when it's in hell and heaven mode, we can still find the flow going on here, because once again, it's still the lightest over here in this area. This is the lightest point of focus, and it still goes into the darker area and spreads out once more. Frank Frazetta is an absolutely incredible artist. His oil painting works are just absolute masterpieces. Holy shit. If you know anything about oil paintings, you know about the effort that goes into them. And holy shit, these are immaculate, incredible. If you recognize him from anything, it's probably Conan the Barbarian and Molly Hatchet albums. That's how I recognize him. I actually went over this piece in particular when I was doing art studies on Twitch. You can actually follow me on there. I'm trying to get back into it. Just be known that it is, there's a lot of brain damage that goes on over there. We try to do art. Key emphasis being try. Now then, just by looking at this, your attention is already pretty prevalent. You're looking at Conan up there at the very top and spreading down. You want to know why? Because it once again follows that whole arrow principle, that whole triangle principle. But instead of before, we're in that 2009 piece, where instead we're starting at the bottom, we're starting all the way up here at the top of the pyramid and going down, because that's where the movement's going. We could tell that basically Conan just landed into this massive battlefield. So the triangle makes sense. We're starting up here and spreading down to seeing this massive battlefield that he's about to enter into. And that horse is mean. Once again, this all comes back to negative, positive space in the distribution of all the pieces coming together. The sky is full of smog and fire. It's a hellish landscape. That's the negative space though. Then we have this army in the background right here. That's another background piece. It's still kind of negative space, but it has more attention. It still fades into the background though. Then of course we have the focal point, which is Conan and his horse diving into battle. This is the center point of the piece. And already you can tell how the visual flow is supposed to be, but we're not done yet. We also have the slight smoke and the foreground enemies. We're starting up here in this general void. Our eyes go towards here to this white silhouette and go all the way down and fan out to this army that he's about to charge into. The army in the background is also important because it helps create another form of divide from the sky to the ground below, essentially, creating this type of effect. To help illustrate it a different way, it's still of a lighter value, but not nearly as light and bright as the pure white silhouette over here. And so our brain goes from any direction in the void, goes down and out, fanning out into the gray. Absolutely incredible piece, just fantastic.
Wow! I shall cleave them asunder and make sure I hear the lamentations of their women.
Let's do another example of this Molly Hatchet piece. Once again, it's our friend, you know who it is, Triangle. This is really pretty simple because there's not a whole lot of complex posing going on here. It really just is a triangle. Simple ass triangle. That's literally all that's going on here. But it works just for that. Also the values going on here. Let's talk a little bit more about the values because it's easier to explain the values going on here than it was in the other piece because there was a lot going on in terms of like color and things like that. So it's similar to how we did the values of that previous piece. Instead, we're doing something different. Now, our brains are starting right over here and they're going down towards this figure. And the shape of the cave as he's going into this little chasm also help because they actually help create a sort of guide towards the figure as well. And because of the way that these walls are designed, it creates this downward triangle, this little V as we funnel down towards the ground and seeing this figure. And of course, once again, fanning out to seeing all the ruin and chaos down here. Now, this is something that I just want to talk about, is the importance of studying inspirations. If you can understand how other artists structure their art, it can help you. This is something that I just want to do, is just kind of like to jumpstart this kind of conversation, get you more interested in this whole process. But it's very important that if you have artists that you're very much inspired by, to break down their styles and figure out what works. Why do they do things the way that they do? Is there a method to the madness? It's very important so that way you can understand how to make your pieces better, so that way you can understand things. The more you break things down in your art, to the shapes, to the lines, to the flow of it, you'll become much better at visually interpreting your art. I've already repeated it a lot, but the whole point of illustration is you're interpreting reality. In order to understand reality, you have to break it down. You have to understand why things work visually, what catches your eye. What's the best form of readability for your pieces? It's very important. If you want to make great illustrative work, you have to understand how to break it down and recreate it. Hopefully you guys learned something from this. I don't consider myself a pro or a good teacher. If you learned something from this, please let me know. Please, I'm just like waiting for comments and shit, but please, if you enjoyed this, like the video, comment this. Tell me about your inspirations as well. Tell me what you liked about this video. Tell me if things I need to better improve upon, because God knows there's a lot that I need to do. We'll improve together on this. Let's get better at this together, you know what I mean? Anyway, like I said, if you want more, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. But yeah, hope you guys have a good one. God bless.